Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the part two of our Docker AWS demo. In the part one, we worked with Docker. We created multiple Docker containers, and we deployed our application. And in the final stages, we created a Docker container containing everything, the base image with the JBoss and our own application. Uh, in this demo or this part of the demo, we're going to integrate our Docker container with the Elastic Beanstalk. So there are a few requirements, before you can, integrate your Docker container with your Amazon Elastic Beanstalk. So you need to include at least one of the two manifest files. Either you need a Docker file or a Docker run.aws.json file. You can create a Docker file to deploy a Docker container, basically to your Amazon Elastic Beanstalk, or you can create a Docker run.aws.json file to deploy a Docker container from an existing Docker image to AWS Elastic Beanstalk. And that's what we wanted to do here. Because we do already have in a Docker image, we want to create a more Docker container from our existing Docker image with the help of Elastic Beanstalk. So the first thing that we need to do, we need to create a docker run.aws.json file. So now if you go back to if you recall, we had app. So if you go to my app 3, that was the app that we used last time. And let's go ahead and create a, so I'm going to, and let's go ahead and create, guys, docker.aws.json file, which I've already created. I will create the file and I'll walk you through, you guys. So give me a few seconds. Something wrong with my screen. Okay, that's better. Sorry, guys. So now let's go ahead and create a your docker run.aws.json file, and I'll explain you the structure around this JSON file. So just simply go ahead and enter this data, and I'll tell you. So let's go ahead and save this file and cat on this file. Okay, so now let's go back to this file. So we created this JSON structure. Basically, we are saying Amazon's Elastic Beanstalk Docker version being 1 and ports. So we are saying the container is exposing this port. So if you recall, that was the port that we exposed the last time when we created our Docker image with the expose command. And if you don't remember, guys, let me just go ahead and show you that one. Give me a second. So cat.maya 2 and alpha. My bad, guys. I deleted my Docker file that I used initially. You saw, okay. But hopefully you recall that we use the expose command to expose the port 8080, and we had created a directory to store our log, and that's what we were saying. Logging is getting stored at this directory. So that means we're exposing port 8080 to our Elastic Beanstalk, and we are telling Elastic Beanstalk to where to look for the log files. So hopefully you get the idea here. Just one more thing here, that the sports section, like as I said, it's basically telling Elastic Beanstalk which port to map local port 82. So on our instance, basically when we're going to launch an instance of this Docker image, we'll be using port 80 instead of 8080. So our 80 will be mapped to this particular this port, which is 8080 in this case. And the logging section, as I mentioned earlier, this is the directory which is going to hold your log. So when you go to your application and click on logging, it's going to fetch all the logs from this particular location. So hopefully you get the idea. So now we are pretty much we can go ahead and deploy your container. We can go ahead and deploy our container using the Elastic Amazon Elastic Beanstalk. In this demo, I'll show you. In the last demo, I showed you the GUI portion of the Elastic Beanstalk. With this demo, I'll go ahead and show you some of the Elastic Beanstalk's CLI. Remember, we had so guys, let me go ahead and get my earlier file that I had. I'm just restoring my earlier Docker file. Hopefully you recall that one. So I'll go ahead and restore my. So if you see here that I have my Docker file as well as my docker run.aws.json file, just to be sure. Now let's go ahead and remember I said we'll be integrating, we'll be using the Git also. So that way you can do a revision controls and some of the other things, merging, multiple branching. So let's go ahead and initialize our Git repository. I'm going to call it a Git ignore. That way, hopefully you understand some of the things. I'll not be talking about much on the Git side here. I do have some other videos, some other documentation. Maybe I can share with you guys later on some of the things on the Git. So let's go ahead and as you can see in our Git repository, we added two files, Docker file and docker.aws.json files, guys. Okay. Now we will use the Elastic Beanstalk's command line to initialize our Beanstalk environment. So to do that, it's pretty easy. We'll use the Elastic Beanstalk's command line, and I'll walk you through. So the command is pretty easy. You will type Elastic Beanstalk and initialize. Okay. So we need to be. Here. Because it doesn't allow you to run as a root, so let's do something pretty quick here. CF mode 57. My free R2. Or let's do one thing. We can copy my 3. Or let's do another. move this together. Let me see TVs. And now let's do. And as you can see, we are inside this particular folder. Okay, now let's go ahead and initialize, and let's to make sure everything looks good. Docker images. Okay, and let's see if we don't have anything running, so that's pretty good. Okay, guys, now let's go ahead and initialize your Elastic Beanstalk. Now I need to do ls-al, and if you get ignore. Okay, perfect, and let's just verify that inside our git and git. Okay, and there are different branches. Okay, everything looks good, guys. So now let's go ahead and initialize our. Okay, yep. So let's go ahead and initialize our Elastic Beanstalk. So go ahead and click enter, EB init, and it says select a default reason. And if you're not sure, you can go back and look for your reason. And this, for our case, we'll be deploying this into the US West. So I'll go ahead and select US East 1, or maybe I'll go ahead and select North California, which is closer to me. So I'll go ahead and select here number 2. And then it's asking for enter your application name. So let's call my Docker Java app, and I can go ahead and press enter. Been created. It appears you are using multi-container Docker. Is that correct? No, we are not using a multi-container Docker right now. I'll talk about the single container versus multi-container sometime later. So let's just simply go ahead and press no here. And then it says select a platform here. So the platform we are using is a Docker. So we'll go ahead and simply, there is an option that's a multi-container Docker. So we'll go ahead and choose the option number 8. It's asking for the Docker version. If you remember, we were using 191. So we good with that one, so we can just simply press 1. Do you wish to set up SSH for your instances? No, I don't want to log into my instances. If you want, we can go ahead and do that, but for the time being, I'm not interested. And simply go ahead and press enter. And once that is done, and if you look here, there's a new directory that got created here by name Elastic Beanstalk. And if you look in this Elastic Beanstalk, there is a file that contains some of your configuration. If you look at this YAML file, so there's a branches, and there are some global configuration that you have just supplied, and we are saying, hey, use the source being the Git here. So you get the idea why we use Git here. So we are integrating this with the Git. So once that is done, so now if you go back to the GUI, I just wanted to show you guys one thing pretty quick. If you go back to services, and if you go under the compute and go back to the Elastic Beanstalk here, we don't have any applications running or anything, guys. You know, that this environment was just created. You know, let's change ourselves to North California. Let me just show you guys something. Okay. And if you remember, here is our app. And if you recall, in the last Elastic Beanstalk, that's what we did. We created 2 apps. So here we created a Docker Java app. So if you click on this app, there is nothing as of right now here. No environment. So there is environment. No application versions. There's nothing here pretty much. You just have your app here. So now what's going to now let me just show you something, and then I'll talk a little bit later. So now we'll go ahead and create our Java development environment. We can call it, we can launch our instances. It's pretty easy. So when you're going to launch those instances, what's happening on the back end, that it's going to automatically launch an EC2 instance. We'll go ahead and install a Docker. We'll deploy your Docker file uh, and it will use your JSON file. It will build a Docker image. It will start a container based on that image. It will install an Nginx HTTP proxy, and they will configure that proxy to relay traffic on your port 80 to your Docker container. So it's doing so many things on the back end. So let's go ahead and deploy one of the application environment, and then I'll walk you through some of these steps again. What's happening on the background? It's pretty easy. Just simply go ahead and type EB again. EB. You can do EB create. With the EB create, you just need to give a name, and so I'm going to call it a Java. My Java app one, probably, whatever you guys wants to call it, and let's go ahead and simply press enter. And it says you have some uncommitted changes. That's fine. And it started to create our environment. The environment details are this. This is the name of the application. So it's using the Elastic Beanstalk application on the back end. The reason it's a West One the platform, it's using this as our platform. It's going to run 191 tier is standard web server. So it started to create this environment. And if you go back to the GUI, and as you can see, in that environment, this is my first application, guys. And if you click on this application, and it has started creating your environment. So we'll go ahead and launch an EC2 instance. On top of that EC2 instance, it will it will go ahead and install Docker. Once that is done, it will go ahead and deploy your container on top of that. So it's going to take a few minutes. So it could take up to 10 minutes. So as I said, this whole process on the back end is going to launch an EC2 instance. It's going to install and configure the Docker. Then it's going to deploy the Docker file and the run.aws.json file that I had created earlier. It's going to build a Docker image. It's going to start a Docker container based on that image. It's going to install the Nginx proxy, and then it's going to configure the Nginx proxy to relay the port 80 traffic to your Docker container, guys. So this will take some time, guys. You guys are familiar with some of the things that we've done earlier in the Elastic Beanstalk lab. Let me just show you something here. It says created environment is starting. As you can see, there's a lot is going on. It's using Amazon S3 storage for the environment data. Created a security group, creating a load balancer. And if you recall, that was the good thing about the using the Elastic Beanstalk. You can scale your application dynamically, and some of these things are creating the same auto scaling configuration and launch group. Some of the things you can go back and look at the same thing on the configuration page. So it's by default when it launched this, it launches a load balance auto scaling. You can go ahead and make some change, and we talked about the network port, HTTP port 880. We are not using any database or anything. It's deploying a EC2 instance of type T1 micro. You can look at the monitoring. We are waiting for the application to get deployed. Same thing with the alarms and events. So guys, in relax back, it's going to take a few minutes. It's going to take up to 10 minutes. Once that is done, I'm sure you recall that the status will change to green. And here is the URL. So now this time we don't have to type any port numbers or anything on our EC2 instance. This is our application URL. Once your application is deployed, you can just simply go ahead and click on this URL and it will launch your application. So give it some time. Once this is done, we'll have an instance with all the needed details. So you get the idea uh, the behind the Elastic Beanstalk and what we just did, and we integrated the Docker with the Elastic Beanstalk to make use of the auto deployment feature of the Elastic Beanstalk, as well as some of the auto scaling features and some of the things. If you go back to the services, go back to EC2, and you should see one more instance. So if you go back to the instances, and here we go. This is our instance in this case. The instance that we are using is my Java app one instance that we are deploying right now. So it's initializing and some of the other things. So let's go back and look at the Elastic Beanstalk. So that's all pretty much, guys. Give it some time. Once this is fully deployed, we'll be able to go to our URL, and that should launch our Java application. Remember, because this is an application, so we need to type the application name after our URL. And again, it's pretty easy. If you decide to make some changes to your Docker file, and if you want to push your changes, just simply use the evu deploy command to push your later, your changes to the Git basically. If you want to get a look at the logs, you can click on the logs here, and then simply go ahead and click on request logs. Let's say maybe last 100 lines. That will take some time. This Elastic Beanstalk will go and connect to the instance, and it's going to fetch the logs from the directory that we specified into our JSON file, if you remember. So give it some time. It will take some time, and then once it's done, we'll have our application up and running. Okay, guys. So our application installation, our application is deployed successfully, and the status of our application has changed to green. All looks good. So let's go ahead and click on the URL just to make sure everything looks good. I'm not able to because sometime it takes a while before it can really the DNS record is full up. So let's go back to the services. Let's go back to the EC2, and we can use the our EC2's IP address probably, and that will be quicker. So let's go back and go ahead and type the IP address, and let's make sure that the security group that we are using does indeed allows access to. Yes, we do have the access to port 80. Now let's go back to the load balancer, and we'll access our application via the load balancer. See if we can reach this DNS name. Yeah, the instance is healthy. Everything looks good. Now let's try to launch our application using this particular DNS name. If this is provision, okay. So you can see the other DNS names are taking a little while, but you get the idea that we can access the application via our load balancer IP. Now let's go and try to see if we can access our Java application. And here you guys. So as you can see, we are able to launch we are able to access our Java application. And again, thanks to Amazon for providing this nice Java application and underlying our infrastructure for me to run this lab for you guys. So now let's go back to the EC2 instance. Let's go back to the services, and let's go back to the Elastic Beanstalk. Go back to your application. You can look at the configuration again. This is already scaling. You can change all of these triggers. You can look at the logs. Now let's go to the logs and click on request logs, and let's pull the last 100 lines. And now what it's doing, that Elastic Beanstalk is getting connected to the Docker container, and it's going to pull the logs from the directory, and and these are the 100 lines. You can just simply download this file, and here are the logs basically here. So hopefully you got a good idea here, and this is some of the monitoring things, alarms, events, and tags. And if you want to deploy more, you got the idea. It's pretty easy. You can go ahead and deploy some more applications. Again, like as it says, to deploy update your application, just simply use the ebu deploy command. You can go ahead and actions. You can create new environment, delete your application. You can create new application. So that's all pretty much, guys. Hopefully you got a good idea that how you can integrate and make use of your Elastic Beanstalk to really automate some of the deployments in the back end. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me your question, and I'll try to answer them. That's all pretty much for this demo. And if you guys, okay, let me just show you if you guys are really interested in one another thing. If you go back to the EC2 instance, and let me do an SSH to this instance. So open an SSH terminal. So we are already on this one. So let's go ahead and launch an SSH-i aws.com EC2-user, and let's go ahead and connect to our Amazon EC2 host. And I don't think so we are allowing SSH access. Let's go back to the security group one more time, guys. Let's go back and add it to the security group, and let's add SSH from anywhere. Just save the change. Let's go back and let's try to reconnect to our host. Our public key is different. The reason because this host is using a different key here. Security groups. Okay, there was no key pair. We did not create a key pair. When we deployed, remember it asked you want to enable SSH. At that time, we didn't do that. The thing that I wanted to show you guys that I wanted to show you that indeed the Docker is running on this host and we do have that container. But you get the idea. If you want to check when you're deploying this application, enable SSH. That way you can connect later on to this instance and verify some of your things. So that was pretty much for this demo, and thank you. I'll see you in another series some other time. Thanks. Bye-bye.